Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a while since I've posted here, but I promise you I'm going to get better this year. I plan on posting more videos as soon as I figure out what I want to post. But today what I wanted to do is kind of give you a rundown on what you can expect as we head into our unit on ancient Egypt. So I'll go over some of the topics, we'll go over a brief timeline, talk about the different kingdoms, I'll tell you some of the famous pharaohs we'll talk about. And I'll even tell you about some of the activities and in-class things we'll kind of do during this unit, as well as give you a preview of your first group project of the year. All right, so let's get right into it. Egypt is located in the northeast corner of the continent of Africa. I'm sure a lot of you know that, but in case you didn't, there you go. Today's capital is Cairo, located up here on the Nile. It kind of acts as that border between Asia and Africa. And for reference, we talked about Mesopotamia, how we just ended with that. There's Iraq right there. Again, we said Mesopotamia occupied the same area as current day Iraq, so it's primarily in this area. So they're pretty close together. And we did talk about how there's some overlap between the Egyptians and Mesopotamians, and we'll even see that when we look at a map here. So a little timeline for you. I don't really know where this comes from, to be honest with you. I just kind of pulled this timeline from the internet, so I don't know why that's in there. So this is the timeline of Egypt compared to some other civilizations. Again, we've already talked about Babylon. We'll talk about Greece and China later on in the year. But if we look at Egypt, we think roughly, again, this timeline kind of differs depending on where you're looking and what you're reading and who studied it, just because we simply don't have an exact date of when the civilization started and ended, right? It's just always up in the air. There's always room for debate. But nonetheless, we think around 2500 BC is when the ancient Egyptians really started coming together as a civilization, and they lasted all the way until shortly before year zero. So if you're doing the math there, that's 2500. Some estimates even say around 3000 years is how long ancient Egypt lasted. Again, it wasn't all continuous. There were some breaks in between each kingdom and each period of unification when they were all united as one big country, I guess you could say. All right, and that's what we'll talk about right here. So, ancient Egypt, when we learn about it, is broken down into three different kingdoms. So that's the Old Kingdom, which is outlined in yellow here. We have the Middle Kingdom, which is roughly the same area, all with the orange stripes. And then we have the New Kingdom, and that is this whole area in green there. That is what that occupied. And if this name looks familiar, Canaan, remember we talked about King Nebuchadnezzar in the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Ended up conquering this area and kind of pushing some Egyptians back out of Canaan and Syria and all that. So a couple things. Old Kingdom. The biggest thing we know about the Old Kingdom is that the Great Pyramids, the Great Pyramid of Giza and the other pyramids in the complex, and the Sphinx even, those all were built during the Old Kingdom. There was a king named Khufu who had the Great Pyramid of Giza built that turned into his tomb. The Middle Kingdom, there's really not a ton to say about them. They're just kind of right in the middle there. There were some pyramids and stuff they built, but they're pretty lackluster and they didn't really survive that long. But the writing was a big thing there. That was the first time in ancient Egyptian history that writing was used for entertainment purposes, so we'll talk about that. And then the New Kingdom. Any pharaohs you might have heard of from ancient Egypt, such as King Tut, all of those ancient pharaohs primarily lived in the New Kingdom time period. Really a lot of what we know about ancient Egypt comes from the New Kingdom, because everything there was just so well documented that we are able to learn a lot from that time period here in the New Kingdom. So we'll spend a couple of days talking about each one of these, so I'm not going to go really far into them right now. I thought I'd give you a couple of famous pharaohs that we'll talk about. Again, there's going to be more than what I show you, but this is just a couple of them. So I just mentioned King Khufu. This is him. All we really know what he looked like is from this tiny little statue that we have here. Again, he is the one that had the Great Pyramid of Giza built. Then we have King Tut. This is not obviously his face. This is his sarcophagus. This is the coffin he was buried in. It's a pretty famous picture now, a pretty famous image. It's very recognizable. King Tut was that child king who died really young. And we really only know about him just because some British guy in the 1920s accidentally found his tomb. Otherwise, he really isn't known for anything else. It's not like he was this great king that did all these things for Egypt. We only know who he is because someone found his tomb. That's all. That's the only reason why he's famous. And then right here, this is a guy named King Ramses II. He is actually known as one of the greatest pharaohs in all of ancient Egypt. Again, just knowing his face from a statue here, we will talk about in class all of his accomplishments, but that's just a few of them. Obviously, there's more, and we will talk about a few more, but I just wanted to give you a little preview of what kind of pharaohs we'll be talking about. So that's essentially it for the preview, I guess, of the actual content. But I figured we would talk a little bit about the kind of activities and projects we'll be doing. So activity-wise, this one I think is a little bit more exciting and interactive for you than Mesopotamia was. This is one of my more exciting units I think I do throughout the year. So some activities you can expect, like hieroglyphics, doing an activity with that. We'll do a little virtual tour of ancient Egypt where you'll find different tombs and pyramids and get to draw them and answer some questions about them. And it is more exciting than it sounds. Again, you get to use Google Earth. It'll be fun. We'll talk about mummification, which some of you will probably be interested in. Some of you may not, depending on if you like things that are a little more gross or disgusting. We will talk about how the pyramids were built, because that is still up for debate today. We don't know exactly how they were able to build a pyramid that long ago, especially just given how large it is. We'll talk about that. We'll do an activity with pyramid building and all that too. And then finally, this is going to be your first group project of the year. It's going to be all related to the pharaohs. Your group will have to research a certain pharaoh from a list that I give you, and then you'll have to figure out how to present the information that you research about them. So we'll talk more about that later on in the unit, but I think that's going to be pretty fun for you guys. It'll teach you some collaboration skills, and you'll get to be creative with it and how you present the information. There's multiple options for how you can do that. It's not necessarily just a slideshow and going up in front of the class and presenting it that way. But this is your first real presentation of the year. Everybody will present their information in one way or another. So I'm excited for that. I think you guys will have fun with it. And then we'll also do an in-class activity kind of related to that project, where we have a little job fair for the pharaohs in which we have to hire pharaohs into current day jobs. So that one's going to be exciting too. I really had a lot of fun with that last year, and I think the kids did too. So hopefully you guys have as much fun with that as we did in the past. But that's about it. That's really the preview of this unit. Again, I'm excited for it. It's really a lot more interactive than our last one was. So I think it's going to be a bit more interesting. I know most people are just interested in ancient Egypt in general, so hopefully it'll just be more interesting to you, and you'll be more willing to learn about it and have more fun with the activities and the lessons that we do. But yeah, that's really all I have. Let me know what you're most excited for. Maybe there's something I didn't cover here that you're hoping we cover in class. Maybe there's something I did talk about that you're really wondering about and you're excited about. But yeah, without further ado, I think that's about it for me. I will see you guys in class. And yeah, have a good night.